Hi, I'm Cathy from Quilt Beginnings in Dublin, Ohio, and we are here for our month 2 Churn Plus of our Kona Stash and Skill Builder series. Today we're going to be doing the Churn Dash block, or they called it Churn Plus, because I think the center is a little bit bigger than our normal Churn Dash. The other thing is it has a separate color, 2 different colors in each block. We're going to be making half square triangles again, like we have before. And we're also going to be filling in with a different color the center of the block. So let's get started. Here's our quilt, our fabrics this month, sorry. And they're going to make 36 blocks. So we have 5 across and 6 down. Every block is a combination of 2 different colors. So they suggest colors and combinations, but you can use your imagination and mix them up if you want. We're going to do them pretty much like they said, with a couple of exceptions, and we'll get into that in a minute. Just as we did last month, we give you the colors of the fabrics in the order that they're listed on your sheet. So if you pull out your color sheet here from your pattern, and you will have to print your pattern off, but pull out your color sheet, and as you pull your fabric out of the bag, they'll be going just down the order. So you'll start on the left and label all the way through A through P. And then your binding, if you chose to get your extra kit, you will get 2 2/3 yard of your background fabric, and you'll need, I think it's 5/8, yes, 5/8 yard for your binding fabric. So if you didn't get the finishing kit, you'll need to pick up those 2 things as well. Okay, so we're going to pull it all out, and I wanted to show you a different way of organizing and labeling your fabric than we did last time. Last time we put stickers on each of our fabrics as we pulled them out of the bag. This time we're just going to take a little slice, and you can see as we take the slice, then we just put an ABC all the way through P, and then just cut a little slice and help keep ourselves organized. It's fun having all the different staff make these different quilts because everyone organizes a little bit differently. So I thought I'd just show you how each one does their own, and then by the course of time, you'll have all different ways to organize your own fabric. All right, so let's get to the pattern itself. Every fabric is used twice except for 2. D and I are a little bit of an exception. There are 30 blocks in this quilt and you only have 14 fabrics. So if you multiply 14 times 2, you get 28 blocks, and we're 2 blocks short. So I and D get to each have an extra block. Everything else is 2 of each. So for every block, we'll need 4 half square triangles, 4 white background squares, 1 6.5 by 2 inch rectangle, and 2 2.5 inch squares for your Churn Dash block. We're going to go ahead and start cutting, and you'll see how we're going to make it really simple. Okay, so from every one of our fabrics, our colored fabrics, we're going to cut 4 7/8 and 2, let me just make sure it's 2.5. It's always good to check your instructions twice and your cutting once. Yes, 2.5 inches. So we're going to cut a 2.5 inch strip and a 4 7/8 inch strip from every fabric of our color that are colored. The background we'll do in just a minute. But one thing I wanted to point out is that the way that they have you do it, and we talked a little bit about this last time, is they had you cut the square bigger than your finished rectangle needs to be. You sew it together and then you have to trim it down. I prefer to cut mine all already to size so that I just sew them and then press them and they are ready to go. They're the size they need to be. So let me show you what I mean. From each fabric, you'll cut your 4 7/8 is the magic number. So I would come over with my ruler, I'd line up my fabric, making sure that my folds are at the top and the bottom, that it's very parallel to the mat below me. Then I bring my ruler over. Whoops, let me get this out of the way. I do a cleaning cut. I come over 4 7/8 inch. So that 7/8 inch is that little tiny tick mark. I don't know if you guys can see it, but it's in between the 3/4 and the full inch. So you just have a little bit of a gap showing. I come over 4 7/8, and then I also need a 2.5 inch cut. So the 2.5 inch line is here. I can pull this out of the way. I can bring my line, my 2.5 inch line, put it on the edge of my fabric and cut. Those are the two big cuts I'll need from each fabric. And as you can see over here, they're already all cut. I'm throwing my refuse on top of it. There we go. After we cut our 4 7/8, we're going to open it up, and you could stack multiples together if you choose. I like to cut 8 pieces at a time. So I would either, actually what I would probably do is pull this over, and there's 4, and I could line up another color, same way, like this, and fold it over. It's a little shorter because it's actually already been subcut. And then I could pull my ruler over. I'm going to cut my cleaning cut. Always do a cleaning cut first. Make sure you get rid of all the salvage that's hanging out there. Come over 4 7/8. And then I'm going to cut once on the diagonal for my half square triangle. So there's 1, 2. There's the other one. So I just cut enough. This is 1 block. This is the second block. 1 block, second block. We need that for all of our fabrics except for D and I. With those, I'd pull out my fabric one more time. I'd cut this is 2 layers. So I'd cut 1 more 4 7/8. And 1 more diagonal. And that's enough for 3 blocks of those 2 colors. The second part of the block, let's go back over here so we can look for a second. The second part of the block, this is what we just cut for each block, 4 of those. The second part of the block is this area. So of the colored pieces, we need 1 6.5 by 2.5 inch piece and 2 2.5 inch squares. They're going to be married with the background fabric, which we'll cut in just a minute. Okay, so we've cut our half square triangles, and I would do all of these, finish cutting them into their 4 7/8 inch squares and subcutting on the diagonal, and then I'd move over to my 2.5 inch strip pile. For those, I just need, for each block, I need 1 6.5 by 2.5 inch piece and 2 2.5 squares. So I don't really want to cut 4 layers at a time because I don't need that many pieces. So instead I'm just going to have 2 layers. And again, I would line up a bunch of them if you were doing, if I were doing this at home. I would line them all up along my board and cut kind of at the same time. But for simplicity of this picture, I'm going to just cut 1 fabric. So I'm going to clean. That's a really deep clean, but these salvages do run up deep. They have a lot of these little pokey marks in them. Going to come over and get 2 6.5 inch strips or rectangles, and then 4 2.5 inch. So here's my 2.5 inch line. There's 2, and I need 2 more. Remember, for fabric D and I, you're going to need to cut 2 more of the 2.5 inch squares and 1 more of the 6.5 by 2.5 inch rectangle. Last thing we need to cut is our background fabric. So let me just put these over here. And I'm going to pull out a piece of my background fabric. And I'm going to cut a 4 7/8 inch strip for it so that I have the other half of my half square triangle. So instead of cutting 5 inch strips, I'm going to cut 4 7/8 inch strips. I'm going to make sure that I square up my fabric. Actually, this fabric is really square. You can see how square it is along the line already, and it's also nice and flat and square to my grid here. I'm going to come over 4 7/8. So using the 4 7/8 inch line on my, that's actually 5 7/8. Let's try 4 7/8. They always say measure twice, cut once. So 1, 2, 3, 4 7/8. I'm going to come up. And I'm going to go ahead and cut a 2.5 inch strip from here just to show you how the whole quilt goes together. I'll cut a 2.5 inch strip here, and I'm going to set this aside. I would go ahead and cut, I think you need, and I put this in your instructions, you need 7 4 7/8 inch strip, and you'll need a total of 60 4 7/8 inch squares cut on the diagonal for your half square triangles. So I'm going to pull this one over. I'm going to square up everything to the thing, the mat here. Cut off my end, clean it up, come over 4 7/8. 1, 2, 3, 4 7/8. I don't know if I can get another one here. I can, 4 7/8. There we go. So from each strip, this is how many layers? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. From each strip, I will get 8 squares or 16 half square triangle units. I just leave them there and cut the diagonal. So this is 1 block, 2 blocks, 3 blocks, 4 blocks. Each one needs 4. All right, so let's put 1 block together. I'm going to pull off 4 of, oh, I've got one more cutting to do. Sorry, I have to cut my 2.5-inch squares as well. Is this how you operate in your home? This is definitely how I operate in my home. You think you're done and you're not. These are 2.5-inch squares, and you need 120 because you need 4 times 30 blocks is 120. And I like to put my 2.5-inch on my end. 2, 3, 4. There we go. All right. So you'll need 4 of these for each block too. So each block will need 4 triangles, 4 squares, 4 colors, 2 2-inch of the 2.5-inch squares, and 1 6.5 by 2.5. So that's for a single block. Okay, so let's come back to our quilt for a second and see where are we at and what are we doing now. If you look at the layout chart, I'm going to see if you guys can see this. Can you see that? You can see it. Inside every square, there's letters that tell you which fabric is in which position of that block. So we look on our sheet and it tells us what fabrics go where. And in this top corner, it's fabric B and fabric O, or fabric O. There are a couple, the 2 exceptions that are different than in the pattern is this block and this block. This one has fabric D let's see, let me just make sure. D is the outside instead of I, and B is the center. And on this one, D is the inside instead of I. So you'll have, that's where your extra 3rd block for D goes. The other I's are marked on here. Everything else is correct. So just those 2. This I will become D, and this I will become D. If you could mark your pattern, that would be very helpful. Okay, let's go ahead and sew this block. This is fabric B. It's so funny, I can't see where I'm pointing. This is fabric B, and this is fabric O. And so we're going to go ahead and assemble that at the machine. So I've got my half square triangles. I've got my fabric B half square triangles and my white background triangles. So here they are. And I'm just going to fold them on top of each other and sew 1/4 inch down the front. If you have trouble with your fabric starting and it wants to push down into your fabric, one thing that you can do to really help yourself is put a single hole throat plate on. I really like to use a single hole throat plate when I'm quilting because when you have these bias edges of triangles and you're starting them, a lot of times they like to push down into the fabric or push down into your sewing machine. So by putting on a single hole throat plate, instead of that big wide opening there, you're going to have a nice small hole. It helps keep that fabric from going down in. Then I like to put my fabric so that you can see if I touch my needle down that I have a lot of the back of that triangle is back behind. I'm just starting right on the edge where the needle is coming onto the fabric. So the feed dogs have something to hold on to. Then I'm just going to sew down. And I'm going to do this 4 times and make 4 half square triangles. Let me get these going. All right, let's go press these, and we're going to press them towards the darker color. I'm going to clip them apart. Oh, let's see where you can see that. Clip, clip, clip. And I'm going to press to the dark. I just like to just seal it and then let the iron really help push it open. I leave the dark on the top because that's the color I'm pressing towards. And the last one. All right. The last thing we need to do with our half square triangles, when you do them the old-fashioned way, is to trim your corners, your dog ears. So I just take a little pair of scissors and clip. It makes it a lot easier when you go to line things up, that things are, they piece together much more cleanly when the dog ears are clipped off. If you want to check yourself at this point, these should measure 4.5 inches. So if you're curious, did I sew them right, or am I the right size that I need to be? And so you can put them back on your mat, and they should measure 4.5. Looks good. I think we're okay. The next part of our block we need to put together our, I don't know if you can look over here. We need to put together these squares here, and then a square to each end of the longer piece. So there's 4 white squares and 3 pieces of colored fabric. So I'm going to sew those together real quickly. So here's my squares. I'm going to put white with each one of these, like this, and then I'm going to put white on each end of my longer piece. I'm going to line them up and chain piece them. And I'm going to go ahead and press everything towards the dark again. I'll come over here. I'm pressing towards the dark. I'll put my dark on top. Press. Press. And then to press towards the dark. Press. And press. We now have all the pieces for our block. We want to make sure we get them oriented the right way. So this goes along the center. These face in to the middle. This faces this way. This, and this. This is going to be shorter because all the seams have already been put together. So I'm going to join and sew in rows. So these 3 together, this is already sewn together, and then sew these 3 together. I'll be right back. All right, we got these sewn together. I'm going to just press, I think I'll press towards the middle. With this, it doesn't really matter because it's got sashing that's going to be separating these blocks. So do whatever way wants to go more naturally. Because of the points down here, I like to let those kind of press with the least bulk, which has them go in. I'm going to do the same thing with this side. Press in, and press in. Let me pull this, all my little schnibbles off. There we go. Look, we almost have a block. There's that side and that side. So we've got 2 more seams to go. I'll be right back. And look, we have a block. So I'm going to go ahead and press these. There we are. This block is a lot easier than last month, I think. This is a beautiful block. So remember, you can follow exactly the directions that they had for which colors go with which, or you can mix it up and make your own color combinations if you'd like. Dee and I will have 3 instances of these 2 places. Everything else will have 2. So we'll come back over. So here we are. There's the first block done. Yay! After you get all of your blocks done, it's time to sash it and put it all together. Just like we did in month 1, this one has a nice sashing that has that little cornerstone built in. I'm going to suggest that you do it the same way we did it in month 1. So instead of cutting all these little rectangles, you will need them for the vertical rows, but we can build this together. All right, so we cut 3 10.5-inch strips by the width of our fabric. We're going to set one of them aside to use for our sashing, the long sashing strip that I'll show you in just a minute. And then I'm going to pull across these other 2. One of them is going to get cut into 2-inch by 10.5-inch rectangles to be our vertical sashing strips. We need a total of 24 of those verticals. So I would just come across my fabric like this and cut at 2-inch intervals. I can only get 20 pieces out of one strip of fabric. So I would take my second strip and cut my remaining 4 pieces. So let me just pull off the remaining 4 2-inch pieces. There we go. And that gives me 4 more. So I will have a total of 24, 20 from this piece and 4 more from this one. This piece that's left will be added at the end of our making our cornerstone row. Okay, here we are. I've sewn my 2-inch strip to my 10.5-inch strip of my background fabric, and I press towards the background because the sashing, we're going to always press towards the sashing pieces. So I don't know if you can see that it's pressed that way, but it is. I'm going to cut it in half. I'm just going to fold it like this, and I'm going to cut on the fold to give myself 2 pieces. I'll be right back. Okay, I've got my 2 pieces, and now I'm going to sew those together just like we did in video 1. This is the last time you're going to get this quick trips to doing the sashing pieces together, so watch carefully. Okay, we're back and we have it sewn together. I'm going to fold it in half. Whoops, I'm going to fold it in half and cut it one more time and sew it one more time. I'll be right back. So here we are with the cornerstones, and I need one more piece to be added to this end because it needs to be white cornerstone, white cornerstone, white cornerstone, cornerstone, and then this is the extra piece I need. All those other ones that we just cut are all these verticals. Okay, so I'm going to take this extra piece here, and I'm going to just sew it to the end here. And it's a little longer than I need, but that's okay. And then that will give me my long cornerstones. I'll be right back. Cornerstones, rows are all put together. Boop-a-da-doo. Now I'm going to fold it and take it back to my cutting station again. This is back and forth, and cut vertical 2-inch strips all the way. I need 5 of them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 down the length of my quilt. We're almost done. Put it on my cutting station. I just fold it so that I can work with it easier. Turn it that 90 degrees, make sure that everything is lined up to my cutting mat. I kind of stagger my seams, and then I'm going to cut. And I need 5 2-inch strips. Here's my cleaning cut. Here's 1, 2, 3, 4. Phew, we have just enough. 5. And there you have it. They're all put together. All right, so we're ready to assemble it. We'll put each of the blocks together, alternating with the vertical sashing. Then we'll insert our row of sashing that we just made so perfectly. Bum-ba-da-dum. In here, and then the next row, and we'll continue on. So that's it for this month. Next month we'll be exploring the world of yellow. So we'll see you next month. Thanks for joining us.